My name is Emily Carter, and I was 17 when my father evacuated our whole family before a Category 4 hurricane, but left me locked inside the house with 2 dogs, 3 cats, and a parrot that screamed every time the wind hit the shutters. My mother did not panic when she told me. She just handed me a flashlight with weak batteries and said, "Stay here with the pets. It'll make you stronger." My father actually smiled from the doorway. Exactly. She belongs here with her dog. Then, before they drove away, they turned off the main breaker to save money, even though I was still inside. I remember standing in the hallway, listening to the cars pull out one by one while the first emergency siren started crying somewhere beyond our street. By midnight, the walls were shaking. By 200 a.m., gas water was coming under the back door. By morning, my phone finally turned on at a neighbor's house, and 88 messages exploded across the screen. The first one was from my mother at 6:30 a.m. "No, no. Please don't do this. We're sorry." That was when I realized they were not afraid I had died. They were afraid of who had found out. Before I tell you what those 88 messages really meant, tell me what the weather is like where you're watching from right now. Is it calm outside? Raining? Windy? Or does the sky look like a storm is coming because the night my family drove away? The weather was not the only thing that turned dangerous. Before that hurricane, I already knew I was the daughter my family tolerated, not the daughter they protected. My father, Harold Carter, went by Hank to everyone who wanted to like him. He had the kind of voice that made strangers trust him. Calm, deep, confident. He worked as a coastal emergency preparedness coordinator in Harbor Point, South Carolina, which meant every hurricane season he stood in front of town halls and church basement telling people how to make evacuation plans, how to secure elderly relatives, how to protect pets, how to check on neighbors, and how no one should ever ignore a mandatory order. People clapped for him. People shook his hand at grocery stores. People told my mother she was lucky to be married to a man who cared so much about public safety. At home, that caring stopped at the front door. My mother, Denise Carter, was softer in public, but colder in private. She knew how to make cruelty sound like discipline. When I was little and asked for help with homework, she said, "You're smart. Figure it out." When I asked for a ride after drama club, she said, "You need to stop expecting everyone to rearrange their lives for you." When I got sick, she told me to stop making myself the center of attention. I learned early that needing something made me inconvenient. Then my younger brother Blake was born, and suddenly inconvenience disappeared from our house. At least for him. If Blake had practice, someone drove him. If Blake needed new shoes, they bought 2 pairs. If Blake forgot a project, my mother stayed up cutting poster board while my father joked that boys needed a little extra backup. His birthday parties had bounce houses, seafood boils, and custom cakes with his name piped in blue frosting. My birthdays were grocery store cupcakes eaten after dinner if everyone remembered. The family rule was simple, even if no one said it out loud. Blake was a child. I was help. I fed the pets, folded laundry, cleaned the guest bathroom before my aunt visited, watched Blake when my parents went out, and answered the phone when my father's office called after hours. My father loved calling me independent. He said it with pride when other adults were listening. "Emily has always been independent," he would say, his hand heavy on my shoulder. Never had to worry about that one. What he meant was, he never wanted to worry about me. My mother had her own version. "Emily doesn't need much." That sentence followed me through childhood like a leash. It meant I did not need attention. It meant I did not need comfort. It meant I did not need anyone checking whether I had eaten dinner before they left me babysitting. The only person who saw it clearly was my grandmother, Evelyn Carter, my father's mother. Grandma, Snorts. Evelyn lived 15 minutes inland in a little yellow house with a screened porch and a freezer full of casseroles labeled by date. She was not loud, but she noticed everything. She noticed when Blake got a new bike, and I was still riding one with a bent handlebar. She noticed when my mother forgot my school award night, and I sat alone in the auditorium holding a certificate I had ironed flat under a textbook. She noticed when my father praised me for being mature in the same breath he asked me to miss a friend's birthday party so I could watch the pets during his work dinner. Grandma Evelyn became the adult who showed up. She bought me winter coats before I admitted I needed them. She drove me to debate tournaments. She kept a spare bedroom ready for me without ever making it sound like charity. And more than once, she said, "Baby, being ignored does not mean you are invisible. It only means the wrong people are looking." I held on to that sentence for years. But even Grandma Evelyn did not know how far my parents would go until Hurricane Mercy came up the coast. That storm was not some surprise thunderstorm that changed direction overnight. It had been tracked for days. My father had been in meetings all week. He knew the projected surge. He knew the evacuation zone. He knew our street flooded in lesser storms. He knew the power grid failed easily near the inlet. He knew all of it because knowing it was his job. That was why later, when he tried to call what happened a misunderstanding, I understood something that changed the way I saw him forever. He did not leave me because he misjudged the danger. He left me because in our family, my safety had always been optional by sunrise. The house was still standing, but something in me had already broken clean away. The storm had screamed for hours like it wanted to peel the roof off with its teeth. I spent most of the night in the interior hallway with the dogs pressed against my legs, the cats hidden in a laundry basket, and my grandmother's old quilt wrapped around my shoulders. The parrot kept shouting words it had picked up from my father. "Move it! Move it! Move it!" Every time it said that. I almost laughed because there was nowhere to move. The shutters were latched from the outside. The front door had swollen in the frame. The back door leaked brown water across the tile until I shoved towels against it with my bare feet. My phone died around 1:40 a.m. The flashlight died not long after. After that, the only light came from lightning leaking through the edges of the shutters. Quick white flashes that made the hallway look like a crime scene. When the worst of it passed, I did not feel brave. I felt hollow. I waited until the wind softened enough to crawl toward the kitchen, step around broken glass from a cabinet door, and pull myself up by the counter. The house smelled like wet wood, animal fear, and something electrical that made me nervous even with the breaker off. Outside, half the fence was down. The neighbor's dock had twisted sideways. A tree limb had punched through the shed. I stood there in damp socks, holding the dog leashes, trying to understand how my family could have slept in a hotel while I listened to the roof groan over my head. Then I heard someone calling my name. It was Patricia Collins, the retired nurse who lived across the narrow canal behind our house. She had come out in a rain jacket and rubber boots, checking porches one by one. When she saw me, her face changed. Not slowly. Instantly. "Emily," she shouted. "Where are your parents?" I said. "They evacuated." She looked behind me at the animals, the dark house, the shuttered windows, and the way I was shaking. "Without you." I did not answer. I did not have to. Patricia brought me to her house because she had a generator and a working kettle. She wrapped me in a sweatshirt that smelled like cedar and plugged my phone into a power strip already crowded with radios and battery packs. While it charged, she called someone. I was too tired to ask who. 30 minutes later, Jenna Brooks arrived in a muddy rescue van with Low Country Paws printed on the side. Jenna had been in my biology class before she graduated early and started volunteering with animal rescue groups during storm seasons. She did not ask stupid questions. She just looked at the dogs, checked the cats, found crates, and said, "We're moving them somewhere dry." That was the first useful sentence anyone had said to me in 12 hours. when my phone finally turned on. It vibrated so hard on Patricia's kitchen table that her coffee spoon rattled. 88 messages, missed calls, voicemails, texts, family group chat, private messages. At first, my stomach lifted because I thought maybe they had been terrified for me. Maybe the roads closed. Maybe they tried to come back. Maybe they realized too late. Then I read the first message. 6:30 a.m. Mom. No. No. Please don't do this. We're sorry. 6:34 a.m. Mom, please answer before you talk to Grandma. 6:41 a.m. Dad, this was all a misunderstanding. You know, we would never intentionally put you in danger. 7:02 a.m. Blake, why are you making everyone look bad? We had no idea it got that serious. 7:18 a.m. Aunt Marlene, plenty of kids would be grateful to be trusted with responsibility. Don't twist this. 7:30 a.m. Dad, please forgive us. We can explain. 8:05 a.m. Mom, your grandmother is hysterical now. Are you happy? That was the message that told me the truth. They were not suddenly sorry because they had imagined me trapped in the dark. They were sorry because Grandma Evelyn knew. I looked up from the phone and Patricia's eyes softened. I called her. She said, I'm not sorry. I started crying then, but not the way people cry when they are comforted. It came out silent and angry. Grandma Evelyn had called my parents before she called me, and whatever she said must have burned through their hotel breakfast like a match dropped into gasoline. By late afternoon, when the roads opened enough for them to come back, my family walked into that damaged house, acting offended that I had survived loudly. My father inspected the hallway and said, The house held up fine. My mother pressed her lips together and said, You made this sound much worse than it was. Blake stood behind them, scrolling on his phone, muttering. Grandma canceled my tournament trip because of this. Aunt Marlene, who had evacuated with them because her condo was closer to the water, looked at the animal crates and said, You always did like drama. I waited for one sentence. I waited for we should have taken you. I waited for we were wrong. I waited for you must have been terrified. None of them said it. My father only said, You need to understand the pressure we were under. That was the moment I stopped arguing. Not because I forgave them, because I finally understood that apologies from people like them were just another way to avoid consequences. I left South Carolina with 1 suitcase, 2 scholarships, and the kind of calm people mistake for forgiveness. After Hurricane Mercy, my parents expected the house to return to normal once the drywall was replaced and the insurance check cleared. My father went back to giving evacuation briefings in pressed khakis. My mother went back to smiling at church. Blake went back to being the golden child whose disappointments were treated like community emergencies. Aunt Marlene went back to calling me sensitive whenever she visited, but I did not go back. I finished senior year with a calendar hidden inside an old chemistry notebook. Application deadlines, scholarship interviews, housing deposits, work-study forms. I applied to colleges in Georgia, Tennessee, and Virginia without telling my parents until I had already accepted a package from a university outside Savannah. My father stared at the acceptance letter like it was a threat. That's too far, he said. My mother said. Who's going to help with things here? Blake said. You're really still mad about the hurricane. Aunt Marlene called me selfish in a voicemail I deleted halfway through. Grandma Evelyn was the only one who smiled. She drove me to campus in her old Buick with a trunk full of towels, notebooks, and canned soup. Before she left, she hugged me so hard I felt like a child again and whispered, Do not shrink just because they built a house too small for you. College did not magically heal me, but distance gave me oxygen. I worked at the campus library, took weekend shifts at a marina office, and eventually found my way into catastrophe property claims, storm damage, flood documentation, structural reports, policy disputes. It was strange, almost funny, that I built a career around assessing what storms destroyed after surviving a family that tried to minimize one. By 26, I was a licensed catastrophe claims investigator for a regional insurance firm. I knew how to read water lines on drywall, how to compare wind damage to neglect, how to build timelines from photos, invoices, weather data, and text messages. Documentation became my second language. My parents hated that. They preferred feelings when feelings helped them, and facts when facts could be bent. I did not cut them off right away. I answered some holiday calls. I visited twice, both times staying with Grandma Evelyn instead of at my parents' house. I sent polite birthday texts, but the center of my family shifted. Grandma Evelyn became my real home. During my visits, we drank coffee on her porch while she told stories about my grandfather, about raising my father, about mistakes she had made by excusing too much for too long. One evening, when the air smelled like rain and marsh grass, she told me the truth about the beach cottage. It was a two-unit property near the Harbor Point Inlet. Pale blue with white trim and a converted garage apartment my grandfather had bought in the 80s. I knew my parents lived there. I did not know they had never truly carried it. "Your father pays me less than half of what that place is worth," Grandma Evelyn said, stirring sugar into tea she did not drink. "Sometimes he skips months and calls it family understanding. Your mother sends repair bills for things they broke. Your aunt stores in the garage and acts like she owns a share. They all think I don't see it." I remember feeling embarrassed as if their entitlements somehow belonged to me. "Why let them stay?" I asked. Grandma Evelyn looked toward the darkening yard because for a long time I confused keeping peace with doing right. Then she reached across the table and covered my hand. I stopped confusing those things after the hurricane. I did not know then what she meant exactly. I only knew her voice had changed. 2 years later, Grandma Evelyn got sick. Not suddenly, not dramatically at first. Small appointments became serious appointments. Serious appointments became folders on the kitchen table. My father became attentive in a way that made my skin crawl. He brought groceries. My mother offered to help organize papers. Aunt Marlene started talking about family legacy. Blake visited and took selfies with Grandma like proof of devotion. Grandma Evelyn let them perform. Then, when they left, she would roll her eyes and ask me to check whether they had moved anything in her desk. A month before she died, she asked me to sit beside her bed and read a letter she had written in careful blue ink. In it, she said she had watched my parents make me responsible for everyone but protected by no one. "Snorts," she said. "Hurricane Mercy was not a mistake. It was evidence," she said. My father knew better. My mother agreed anyway. And the family tried to hide it because they understood exactly how ugly it was. Then she wrote the sentence, "I still know by heart. I cannot give you back the night they left you in the dark, but I can make sure they never again use shelter as a weapon against you." When Grandma Evelyn passed, my father arrived at the attorney's office wearing a navy blazer and the expression of a man preparing to receive what he believed was owed. My mother held tissues she did not use. Blake looked bored. Aunt Marlene whispered about tradition. Then the will was read. The yellow house was to be sold and divided among several charities and modest family gifts. But the beach cottage, the property my parents had lived in for years, the property my father had always called his future, belonged entirely to me. No shared ownership, no family committee, no conditions, just my name. Emily Carter, legal owner. My father's face went gray. My mother said, "There must be a mistake." And for the first time in my life, A room full of adults did not turn to me and ask me to make things easier for them. 3 years after Grandma Evelyn's funeral, my parents were no longer just my parents. They were my tenants. I did not evict them right away. I did not show up with boxes. I did not cut the locks, threaten them, or make a scene in the driveway. Even though a darker part of me remembered standing inside that same family system while they drove towards safety without me. Instead, I did what they never expected from the girl they called dramatic. I handled everything properly. I hired Claire Bennett, a real estate attorney in Charleston with silver hair, sharp eyes, and a way of making reckless people sound expensive. Claire reviewed the deed, the old payment records, the informal arrangement Grandma Evelyn had tolerated, and the condition reports on the property. Then she drafted a lease, market rent, clear occupancy limits, maintenance responsibilities, no unauthorized residents, no structural changes without written permission, no use of county connections to interfere with ownership, permits, inspections, or sale. Claire included that last clause after reading my father's old text messages and raising one eyebrow so slowly I almost laughed. When my parents received the lease, they reacted exactly as expected. My father called first. "You cannot charge your own parents market rent." I said I can charge tenants market rent. My mother got on the line and said your grandmother would be ashamed of this. I said, Grandma Evelyn wrote the letter herself. That made her cry or pretend to. Blake sent me a message that took 4 thumb scrolls to finish, all about loyalty, forgiveness, and how family should not treat family like business. Aunt Marlene left a voicemail accusing me of manipulating a dying woman, which was impressive considering she had spent Grandma Evelyn's final weeks asking about furniture. I did not argue with any of them. I sent one email through Claire. Sign the lease by the deadline or vacate the property. They signed for 3 years. The arrangement was cold, but clean. Rent came through electronic transfer, usually late by 2 or 3 days. Often with comments in the memo line like family home or under protest, as if pettiness could change ownership records. My parents stayed because they had no better option. A comparable coastal rental near Harbor Point would have cost far more. And my father's careful public image had always rested on private subsidies. Grandma Evelyn had made him look more stable than he was. Without her, the truth showed. My mother's part-time job at a boutique hotel had reduced hours after storm repairs slowed tourism. My father developed blood pressure problems and used them as shields in every conversation. Blake, despite being treated like a future president his whole life, had moved in and out of sales jobs, startups, and opportunities that mostly required other people's money. None of that was my crisis. I was living outside Savannah by then, working long claim cycles after hurricanes, hailstorms, and flood events. I had a small apartment, a reliable car, and a reputation at work for being calm around angry people. My supervisor once said, "Emily can sit across from a man yelling about his roof and still find the missing invoice." I did not tell him I had been training for that since childhood. Then Blake started texting more often. At first, he was casual. "Hey, how's work? You ever come back to Harbor Point? Mom misses you. Dad's been stressed." I answered lightly because I wanted to see where it went. Documentation had taught me patience. People reveal more when they think they are steering the conversation. A month later, he sent, "Would you ever consider selling the cottage back to the family?" Back to the family as if it had wandered off. I asked what he meant. He said, "Mom and Dad were tired of feeling insecure in their own home." He said Dad had health issues. He said Mom cried every time rent was due. He said Grandma Evelyn would never want them scared of being homeless. I asked if they had made an offer. He sent a number so low I stared at it for a full minute thinking he had forgotten a zero. It was less than half the market value, and payment would be structured privately to avoid unnecessary bank complications. The guilt was supposed to do the rest. Then came my mother's text. We are willing to forgive the past if you stop punishing us. My father followed with, come down this weekend. Let's settle this face to face like adults. Adults. That word from him almost made me smile. I told them I would come. I did not say yes to the sale. I did not say no. I simply wrote, I'll be there Saturday morning. Blake sent a thumbs up emoji. My mother sent a heart. My father sent good. Bring an open mind. I brought something else. A printed appraisal. A copy of the lease. 3 years of payment records. Inspection photos. Grandma Evelyn's letter. And one more document they did not know existed yet. A signed letter of intent from Low Country Paws Rescue to purchase the cottage at fair market value and convert it into a storm evacuation shelter for families with pets. The day I drove back to Harbor Point, I brought a folder instead of an apology. It sat on the passenger seat in a blue legal envelope, thick enough to make the seatbelt sensor blink when I turned too sharply. I crossed the inlet bridge just after 10 in the morning, and the cottage came into view between leaning palms and weather-beaten mailboxes. Pale blue siding, white trim, new roof I had paid for after the last inspection. My grandmother's wind chimes still hung near the porch, though my mother had once said they looked old-fashioned. The second I parked, the front door opened and my mother stepped out wearing lipstick, soft curls, and the kind of smile she used at church potlucks. Emily, she said warmly, as if I had come home from college for Thanksgiving instead of arriving to discuss a below property grab. She hugged me before I could refuse, her perfume sharp against my jacket. You look thin. Are you eating enough? That was new. When I was 17 and living on crackers during exam week. She had told me hunger built discipline. My father waited inside at the dining table with papers spread in front of him like a man conducting business. Blake's truck was not in the driveway, which meant he was either late or pretending neutrality. Aunt Marlene's car was not visible either, which I noticed without knowing why. My father stood slowly, one hand at his lower back, making sure I saw the effort. Thanks for coming. He said. We've all been under strain. My mother touched his shoulder. Your father's health has been difficult. I sat across from them and placed my folder on my lap, not the table. My father cleared his throat. He had prepared remarks. I could tell. This place has history, he began. Your grandparents bought it for the Carter family. Your mother and I raised you children here. We maintained it, protected it, kept it alive. That was false. But I let him continue. Now, we understand your name is on paper, legally. Yes, but morally. This home belongs to more than one person. My mother nodded, eyes already wet. Grandma Evelyn would want peace. I thought of the letter in my folder and said nothing. My father slid a printed offer across the table. Same insulting number, different font. This is what we can manage. We would pay you directly over time. No need to involve banks or outsiders. You'd still be doing very well for someone your age. For someone your age. Like ownership was a costume I had borrowed. My mother reached for my hand and I moved it to open the folder. I'm not selling you the cottage, I said. Silence landed hard. My father's jaw moved once. My mother blinked like I had slapped her. Emily, she whispered, do not be cruel. I pulled out the letter of intent and laid it on the table. I have accepted an offer from Low Country Paws Rescue. They are purchasing the property at fair market value. After closing, they plan to renovate both units into temporary housing for evacuees with animals during hurricane emergencies. My mother stared at the logo. My father went still. Not angry yet. Calculating. That kind of use will require approvals, he said. They are aware, I replied. Their board has already started the process. His eyes sharpened. You think turning your grandparents' cottage into a kennel is honoring family? That word kennel showed me who he still was. Pets had been inconvenient until they could be used to abandon me. Now animals needing shelter were beneath him. Grandma Evelyn loved animals, I said. And she loved people who had nowhere safe to go. My mother stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. So this is revenge. No, I said revenge would have been turning off your power and leaving during a storm. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. That was when the back door opened and Blake walked in, carrying coffee like he had just happened to arrive. Okay, he said too loudly. Let's all stay calm. I looked at him. Did you know about their offer before you started texting me? He glanced at my father. Tiny movement. Enough. I was trying to help. He said you were fishing for information. I'm your brother. That's not an answer. My father slammed one palm on the table. Do not interrogate him in my house. My house, I said. The words were quiet, but they changed the temperature in the room. Then a toilet flushed somewhere beyond the converted garage door. We all heard it. My mother closed her eyes. Blake muttered something under his breath. A moment later, Aunt Marlene stepped into the hall wearing slippers, leggings, and one of my grandmother's old cardigans. She froze when she saw me. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then I looked at my parents and said, How long has she been living in the garage apartment? My father said. That is none of your concern. I opened the lease to the occupancy clause and placed it beside the offer. It is exactly my concern. Aunt Marlene recovered fast. I've been helping your mother with what I asked. Hiding. My mother burst into tears then, real or not. But I had already taken photos of the extra shoes by the garage door, the mail stacked with Aunt Marlene's name, the bedding visible through the half-open apartment room, and the separate space heater plugged into an outlet specifically forbidden by the lease after the last inspection. Documentation. Always documentation. I stood to leave. My father followed me onto the porch. The air outside was thick and hot. The inlet glittering beyond the road like nothing ugly had ever happened there. You need to think carefully, he said, voice low. Permits in this county can get complicated when applicants upset the wrong people. I looked at him. Are you threatening the sale? I'm telling you how things work. Text it to me, I said. He narrowed his eyes. I drove away before he answered. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Dad, you may own paper, but I still know people in county offices. Don't start a fight you can't finish. I forwarded it to Claire Bennett before I even reached the highway. Her reply came fast. Good. Keep everything. Say nothing more. By Monday, Claire had the lease violations, unpaid rents, unauthorized occupant evidence, photos, texts, and the buyer's permit timeline organized into one file. Your father thinks reputation is evidence. She told me it isn't. Evidence is evidence. Meanwhile, my mother started calling neighbors. She told them I was selling the family home out of spite. She told them I was forcing aging parents into the street. She told them an animal rescue would ruin the neighborhood. By Wednesday, 3 people I barely remembered from childhood had messaged me about forgiveness. By Thursday, someone had posted in the Harbor Point community group that Low Country Paws was trying to bring noise and strangers into a quiet residential lane. By Friday, the permit hearing had been moved to a larger room because public comment was expected. My father had chosen his battlefield. He forgot I had spent my adult life learning how to walk into damaged places with a camera, a file, and no fear of what people called me. By the time the county hearing started, my father had convinced half the room that I was the villain. The meeting room at the Harbor Point Municipal Building was packed with neighbors, retirees, church friends, 2 local reporters, and people who had clearly come because my mother had cried to them in a grocery aisle. My father sat in the second row wearing a pressed shirt with his old emergency management badge clipped to his belt, even though he was not there officially. That detail mattered. He wanted the room to remember him as the man with authority, the calm voice during storms, the public servant who told other people how to survive. My mother sat beside him, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Blake stood in the back with crossed arms, performing reluctant concern. Aunt Marlene whispered to anyone who leaned close enough. I heard my name, unstable, money, and poor Denise within 5 minutes of walking in. Claire Bennett walked beside me with one leather folder and no visible expression. Jenna Brooks was already there with 2 board members from Low Country Paws Rescue. Patricia Collins sat near the aisle in a blue cardigan, hands folded over her purse. When she saw me, she gave one small nod. Snorts. It studied me more than anything my family had ever said. The hearing opened with zoning staff summarizing the application. Low Country Paws wanted to convert the 2-unit cottage into a limited emergency evacuation shelter for families with pets during declared storm events. Not a boarding kennel, not a commercial daycare, a temporary seasonal emergency resource with occupancy caps, noise rules, waste management, parking plans, and volunteer staffing. Jenna presented calmly. She explained how many families refused to evacuate because shelters would not take animals. She explained how people slept in cars with pets during past storms. She explained that the cottage's layout made it ideal for short-term separation of cats, dogs, and families needing a safe place inland of the immediate surge zone. Then public comment began, and my mother stood first. Her voice trembled perfectly. I am not against animals, she said, which meant she was absolutely against whatever came next. But this is a family home. My husband and I have lived there for years. Our daughter inherited it through circumstances that were painful for everyone, and now she is using it to punish us. She paused while sympathy moved through the room like a draft. We are in our 60s. We are not wealthy people. We raised her, loved her, gave her everything we could, and now she wants to throw us out and replace us with strangers. My father stood next. He did not cry. He was too smart for that. He used his public voice. I have spent decades helping this county prepare for storms, he said. I respect emergency planning, but this proposal is not about safety. It is about resentment. The applicant is being used as a tool in a private family dispute. He looked at me then, not with anger, but disappointment. That was his favorite weapon. I asked the board to consider whether this project truly serves the public or merely legitimizes one person's vendetta. Aunt Marlene spoke after him and called me volatile. Blake did not speak, which was his way of hoping to benefit from both sides later. Then Claire touched my elbow. Now, she said. I walked to the microphone with my folder. My hands were steady. That surprised me until I realized I was not 17 anymore. I was not in a dark hallway waiting for someone to remember me. My name is Emily Carter, I said. I am the legal owner of the property under discussion, and I support the sale to Low Country Paws Rescue. I placed the deed copy on the document table. There have been several claims made today, so I will address them with records. I showed the lease my parents signed. I showed the occupancy clause. I showed the payment history, including late payments and unpaid balances. I showed photographs documenting Aunt Marlene living in the converted garage apartment in violation of the lease. Aunt Marlene snapped. I was helping family. One board member asked her to remain quiet. I continued. I showed my father's text implying county permits could become complicated because he knew people in county offices. The room shifted then. Not dramatically. Carefully. People who had arrived ready to pity my parents started looking at each other. My father stood face tight. That message is being taken out of context, Claire said. The full thread has been submitted. He sat down. I could have stopped there. Legally. Maybe I should have. But my parents had not made this only legal. They had made it moral. They had walked into a public room and asked strangers to see them as loving parents being betrayed by an ungrateful daughter. So, I turned one page. There is another reason I support this project. I said when I was 17, Hurricane Mercy triggered a mandatory evacuation for our area. My father, who worked in emergency preparedness at the time, evacuated my mother, my brother, my aunt, and himself. I was left behind in the house with the pets. My mother whispered, "Emily, don't." I did not look at her. My mother told me staying would make me stronger. My father agreed and said I belonged there with my dog. Before leaving, he shut the storm shutters from the outside and turned off the main breaker to save money. I spent the night in the dark during Category 4 winds. Someone in the back muttered, "Jesus," I heard my father say. "That is not fair." I looked at the board. Patricia Collins found me the next morning. She can confirm it. Patricia stood slowly. I found her soaked, shaking with those animals in a powerless house. She said her family was gone. Jenna stood next. I helped move the animals that morning. She said Emily was 17. She had been left alone. My father's public face began to crack. A board member leaned toward the microphone. "Mr. Harder, were you employed in county emergency preparedness at that time?" My father opened his mouth, but there was no answer that helped him. If he said yes, he admitted he knew the danger. If he said no, the public record would correct him. Finally, he said the storm track changed. I removed one final page from the folder. "This is a text from my mother at 6:30 the next morning," I said. "It says, 'No, no, please don't do this. We're sorry.'" The next message asks me not to talk to my grandmother. They were not confused about what happened. They were afraid she had found out. My mother began crying loudly then, but the sound no longer worked the way it used to. The room had changed. The neighbors who came to defend her now understood they had been recruited into a lie. The board asked a few more technical questions about traffic, occupancy limits, emergency activation periods, and code compliance. Jenna answered everyone. Claire answered the legal ones. My father tried once more to speak about family values, but the chair stopped him. "We are here to consider the application," she said. "Not to retry your family history. The permit was approved with standard conditions, not because everyone suddenly loved me, not because the world became fair in one afternoon, because the facts were stronger than the performance. After that, the eviction moved forward. My parents received proper notice. Aunt snorts. Marlene was listed as an unauthorized occupant. My father refused to leave by the deadline because he still believed consequences were things that happened to other people. Claire filed. The court ordered possession. The sheriff enforced it on a gray Tuesday morning while I stayed in Savannah and let professionals do their jobs. I did not go watch. I did not need to see my mother carry boxes to feel whole. Blake sent one final message. "You went too far." I blocked him without answering. My father's workplace opened an internal review after the hearing transcript and his permit text became public. A man whose job had been public safety could not easily explain abandoning a minor during a mandatory evacuation, then implying he could influence county approvals years later. He resigned before the review finished. My mother lost the neighborhood sympathy she had spent months collecting. Aunt Marlene moved in with a cousin 2 counties away and told everyone I had always been cold. My parents ended up in a small inland rental they could actually afford, far from the inlet, far from the porch, where they once treated my grandmother's generosity like birthright. Low Country Paws closed on the cottage at fair market value. The first renovation plan added reinforced interior rooms, backup power, raised storage, washable floors, and a small memorial plaque near the entrance. Jenna asked what I wanted it to say. I chose the Evelyn Carter storm room for every person and every animal who deserves not to be left behind. I used part of the sale money to fund the backup generator. The rest went into savings, therapy, and a life where my phone no longer buzzed with demands from people who called cruelty a misunderstanding. There was no reunion, no tearful holiday dinner, no final scene where my father admitted everything. And my mother begged me to come home. People like that often apologize only when apology is cheaper than accountability. I did not want their cheaper version of love anymore. My family used to say I was strong because they did not want to help me. Now I know strength is not surviving what should never have happened. Strength is refusing to build your life around the people who made it happen. My father once left me in the dark because he believed I had no power. Years later, I did not return the same cruelty. I returned the evidence, the lease, the law, the truth, and the consequences. Then I walked away into a life where the light stayed on. We hope this fictional story left you with something deeper than the drama. It was created only for education, entertainment, and storytelling value. We hope it reminds you that there comes a time when choosing yourself is no longer selfish, but necessary for preserving your confidence, peace, and sense of identity. You cannot continue giving everything to others while ignoring the parts of you that has been asking for protection.